on the agenda. So if there are any members of the public who would like to speak, what you will do is raise your hand and you will be called on.
We should emphasize it is for matters that are not on the agenda.
Right, for matters not on the agenda. I did say that.
Yeah.
And I didn't, whoops, and I did not see any. So I think we will move on to the planning director's report.
Okay, thank you, Chair Tauber and members of the Planning Commission. I am pleased to announce that we've completed our work with the General Plan Steering Committee over 2 weeks ago. And last week, we had a brief meeting introducing the general plan to the City Council, giving a status on kind of where we've been, how we've got to where we are, and where we are moving forward. We are finalizing, we prepared essentially a working administrative draft. We're doing a few final formatting edits and fixes, and we're going to have that launched as a formal admin draft on November 2nd. And then we'll begin a process for public review, which will include a scoping session towards the end of next month or early December, a CEQA scoping session, which is like an initial kind of public meeting or workshop on the general plan and allowing people to identify any particular environmental issues or concerns that they would have that ought to be addressed. Scoping sessions are typically very useful for projects where there are maybe some very particular interests. The general plan is very broad, so we're going to be covering a lot of topics as part of the review in any case, but we will hold the scoping session. And then we'll be following up with some informative meetings and workshops for the Planning Commission and City Council while we're in the process of preparing the draft EIR. So we've got several months out before we get to formal hearings, but we will begin kind of a learning process on the general plan. And as I reported to the City Council, and I'll send you, if you haven't seen it, and I apologize, I probably should have put the heads up that we were doing that if I hadn't. I'll send you the link to the recording, and you could certainly read. The staff report is very brief, and there was a short PowerPoint presentation. And we will be, again, holding some study sessions in the upcoming next few months. And also in the meeting, I did bring the council up to speed on a number of projects that we're working on, primarily for housing. One of them is the ADU website and workbook that we've been working on with the county and other jurisdictions in Marin to create a sort of a central interactive website that's a resource for property owners interested in developing ADUs. And aside from explaining kind of the permitting process and the various zoning regulations and things, it's also meant to be a resource to help people understand the different types of ADUs and costs and benefits. And it includes an ADU calculator, so you can begin kind of plugging in numbers and get an idea what your costs are going to be. And also how to manage tenants, how to seek out, find the right kind of tenants and things like that. So it's really a resource for property owners. And there'll be a webinar on this on Thursday night that will include a breakout session for Larkspur. So our staff, Aaron and myself, are going to be attending that meeting on Thursday night. And I just sent you the links to this information before the meeting. Let me know if you have any questions. Other projects that we're working on, again, collaboratively with the county through utilizing funding that is being provided by the state. We're working on inclusionary housing and fee nexus study with a number of other agencies. So that's to review our inclusionary housing requirements, which is we do require a percentage of housing to be affordable in conjunction with development. And while that's beneficial for creating affordable housing, it is also, it can be a bit of an obstruction because it does add cost and it can slow down housing development. If you're not aware, San Rafael recently scaled back their inclusionary housing requirement in order to encourage more development. So it's an interesting conundrum with inclusionary housing. And then the same thing with fees. We're looking at fees to help support if there's new commercial development or even single family residential development. There are opportunities to gather some fees to support other housing projects if there's a nexus to this commercial development or the housing actually driving your affordable housing need. So those are things being studied. We'll also be studying the rental cost for second units to be able to gauge our ability to count them towards affordability levels. And another project is the objective design and development standards. We're getting ready to launch a draft toolkit, which again, it's a countywide effort, but it's really design, kind of creating design standards for housing should we have a housing projects that's mandated by the state. We'll be able to have a say in the design. If we're not allowed to do a subjective design process, we're going to sort of pre-design housing or pre-design the kinds of elements we want to see in housing. And in doing this, actually, a number of sites throughout Larkspur were selected as good example templates for this kind of toolkit. So I think you'll find that interesting. We'll be bringing that forward for study session to the commission soon before the end of the year. And one other significant kind of housing project is we're just beginning to work out with county and these other agencies funding to help support the eventual housing element to begin that process in early 2021 to begin selecting sites, develop all the data and the demographics needed to support a housing element, to create an equity chapter and then create equity standards for that to meet the requirements of the state legislation and the Department of Housing and Community Development. So there's a lot on our plate in the near future, and it's all going to be happening sort of simultaneously, and we'll keep you apprised. A couple other things real quickly. We are beginning to work on opening to the public. The initial effort will simply be through limited appointments. We're not going to just have open doors or lines kind of waiting outside. I think one of the commissioners was asking about whether or not it's, if we anticipate having any in-person meetings. I don't see any plans for that throughout the county at this point, largely because I think it's the group gathering is really the biggest issue of concern. So as of now, we're looking at continuing the online meetings, but we are going to be allowing accommodating in-house appointment meetings for planning and particularly building department. That's really where it's needed for taking permits, getting permits out for people who are a little bit challenged with dealing with email and all these other online things. And us not having good software for that, good permit software doesn't make it any easier for either ourselves or the clients. So having some appointment times will be helpful. It is a challenge because the layout of our building is one that doesn't accommodate easy access from the front door up to the upstairs, et cetera. So we're working on those logistics. but we hope to begin opening to appointments next month. So any questions for me?
Anyone have questions?
I have a question, Neil. Do you have numbers that are attached to the housing element? In other words, what's Larkspur's obligation, or is going to be its obligation?
I'm thinking, I'm not sure if I reported to you. I think I did report to you at the last meeting that we were looking at some preliminary methodology recommendation that would give us over 1,000 units, just a little over 1,000 units for the next 8-year cycle, which is almost 10 times our last cycle, and certainly a good bit more than some of our largest cycles in the past. And that's a result of a methodology approach that's been adopted by ABAG, or at least the methodology committee and the executive committee at this point, that really leans towards an equity factor. And in conjunction with that, the city of Larkspur does, we do have a transit hub. We've got we've got a ferry station and a rail station, even though it's really in just the corner and it services the greater region, the greater area around Marin County. It's part of our jurisdiction. We also have a high level of what's called high resource areas. It's along Sir Francis Drake and Magnolia Avenue. Our main corridors are all considered what's called, it's kind of another equity factor, high resource areas that have meet a lot of tests for having good schools, well-paying jobs, things that could potentially help support infill housing and support affordable housing. So there's a few factors that have gone into the methodology that have really pushed a lot of numbers towards higher earning, higher income suburban areas. And, for better, for better or worse, I think one of the challenges that we see with this approach is part of the Plan Bay Area concept. The sustainable community strategy is to marry the jobs, get the housing near the jobs, and try to marry the housing with the jobs, and this is actually seems to be creating a greater imbalance that may drive for more commute and more disparity in our housing and jobs connection. That's part of the, I think, response that some of the cities are going to be bringing to the table as this goes forward. It needs to go through a public review process and then back up to the Department of Housing and Community Development to see whether they agree that this is going to be a practical approach. I think a lot of the communities, particularly in Marin, Marin is being hit with a very high number under this formula, and Larkspur is one of the highest proportionally in Marin. And the large concern is it's really setting us up to fail. That's one of the statements. I don't think we don't want to respond back to this as, we don't want to do our share, but it really becomes a question of practicality and balance. So we'll be continuing to follow up and keep you guys informed on that.
Is anybody pushing back on, I'm sure when those things were created, it was pre-COVID, or at least pre-whatever is going to happen. With everybody working from home, a lot of employers are thinking that people aren't going to go back to the office, in the same way when all this is over. And it may change commute patterns, and it may change demand for office space and so on and so on. And I'm just thinking that maybe as the pushback starts to happen, that those kind of issues might be raised as
well. I think those issues are, yeah, and I think those issues are being raised. That's definitely factor in the discussion. I think the challenge, particularly from the agency point of view, is it's difficult to point towards any specific trend that's going to occur. The problem is nobody's really sure how this is going to play out, and certainly we recognize this may reduce. You may have more people working remotely and reducing commute. So the point of that may be it's better to have people kind of spread out to the suburban or rural areas. There's a lot of pros and cons to looking at different directions. The only problem is I don't think there's any confluence or agreement on exactly what the future will hold, and it's difficult that they're basically following state mandated timelines to get these numbers out and to meet what is currently considered a housing crisis. So I'm not debating the point. I think it's a good point, and it would be it'd be kind of nice. I think when we look at a number like that, we'd certainly like to stop and give it some time to marinate and see, is this really one? Is it needed? Is it a practical approach? And maybe there's some rethinking to do. But that is part of the conversation and discussion.
I was just going to say that it may be the best thing to do, just as a suggestion, is agree to relook at this, say 2 years from now, when it's become clearer what people are likely to do.
Well, when you're talking with ABAG and HCD, where the challenge we have is we're a pretty small voice within the region. So it's a matter of trying to get some commonality with other agencies in similar situations. In this case, it's a lot of communities in the East Bay or South Bay that are a little more peripheral to the large job centers, like communities like Piedmont, Walnut Creek, some communities in the South Bay, again, Saratoga, places like that are really looking at some surprising numbers for their particular communities. So, but I'll send you, if I haven't, I'll make sure and send you copies of the letters. We're going to be sending out more public now that we've reached a public comment period. In fact, I'll send you links to the information on how to send in public comments.
Thank you.
Thanks, Neil.
Okay, we're going to move on to the 2 public hearing items that we have on the agenda. The first one is design review floor area ratio 19-27 for 32 La Cuesta Drive in Larkspur. I guess we want to staff report.
It will be brief. I am Senior Planner Kristen Tyke, taking over for our consulting planner Lorraine Weiss. Before I start, I want to make sure everybody has received the late mail that I emailed to you all today from 40 La Cuesta regarding this project. Did everyone receive it? If not, we can make it available on the.
Yes, and there was something from 80.
From 80, yeah.
Yeah, there have been a few.
Okay, well, today was the one I sent you one today specifically from 40 La Cuesta, so I just want to be sure you received that. Okay, so the Planning Commission has reviewed this application prior to tonight on July 28th and October 13th. And as you have gone through these hearings, you've requested some modification to design to address some concerns regarding finishing the siding around the home and reducing the massing of the proposed new addition on the side of the garage. On October 13th, when you heard this application last, you continued to have some concerns regarding the height of the garage addition, but were generally satisfied with the revisions to the exterior improvements that were proposed. and expressed no concerns regarding the small second-story addition. So at the conclusion of your discussion, it was determined that it would be best if the plans were modified and gave you a complete view of what the revised design would look like. And you continued this application to tonight in order to see the revised plans and the revised story poles. At this point, the applicant has provided us, as you can see, revised plans, which staff has determined appear to be quite appropriate and in scale with the home. It's a much more modest height now in addition compared to where we started. We have continued to recommend approval, and we have provided you with the findings and conditions of approval for this. I think that concludes my report.
Thank you. Does
Oh, I'm
anyone-
sorry. There is one additional comment though. On the landscape plan, the applicant has shown the vegetative screening they've promised the neighbor at 28 La Cuesta on the property at 28 La Cuesta. As you can see here, it's a small series of round circles along the property line with a little number that says C with an arrow pointing to it. And we would like you to, if you believe this hedgerow is important in terms of the screening of this addition, it would be best if the installation of the landscaping were required to be on 32 La Cuesta, as this is their application.
Can that be done as a condition of approval?
Yes.
Kristen, just to address the latest mail that we got, that you sent over, that was from 80 La Cuesta actually, where there was an indication that the plans that were just shown, just held up in front of the screen at our last meeting, referred to a 9-foot height and not an 11-foot height for that garage addition. What is your recollection of what was shown? Is this, looking at the plans, it looks like this is very much what was held up.
This is,
Combined
yeah,
Commissioner Kunstler, sorry, this is Director Toft. I just wanted to note that for the record, we did send out to the commission the email that came in at 5:41 today from
right. Yeah, that's what I'm referring to.
Ms. McConnell at 80 La Cuesta. And so that has gone to the commission. We still do need to get it up on the.
Right. So I guess my question though is that the plans that we have on our hand now, those are the same plans that were shown just over the Zoom camera at the last commission meeting. Is that your understanding?
this plan is what was shown prior, but with a revised garage addition that's lower.
Right. Okay. But as you recall, it was just sort of held up. These alternative plans were just sort of held up, and they
Right.
appeared visually to complied with the desires of the commission. And I just want to know if those plans that were shown up like this are the same ones that we received in the current packet.
Well, he didn't provide us with that plan that he held up. He provided us with revised plans that.
Okay. All right.
So I think
That.
If
maybe to answer Daniel's question, what was held up was that the eyebrow was going to be the roof line, which is what they drew. So I don't know that they talked about how tall that was. It was that they were going to continue the eyebrow.
Yeah, and recollection of the people who addressed us this evening from Ada La Cuesta was that this is still 2 feet higher than what was shown or what was discussed at the end of the last meeting. So I just wanted to clarify if we're all on the same page, that's all.
Aaron,
And-
could you show the front elevation, please, of the proposed? My recollection is the prior elevation was 13 feet,
Right.
just a few inches, and they offered to lower it by 2 feet, which is now 11 feet, and that's what's proposed on this plan.
Okay. All right. That clears it up.
Yeah, and if I can just reinforce that, clearly the change was simply a 2-foot reduction
Mhm.
from the design you saw. And that's what they had drawn and were proposing was just to go from 13, 2.5 down to 11,
Okay.
2.5. And because at the time we had even suggested, well, if the commission wanted to approve it, as that could be a very straightforward condition of approval, is just to bring it down 2 feet. And then I think rather the commission said, well, we want to just see the plans in their entirety and see story poles.
And I just want to add to that, I just listened to the entire recording of the October 13th meeting, and that's exactly what was discussed. The commission talked about bringing it down by 2 feet, but then wanted to see the plans to see what it would look like, as well as the story poles.
Okay. Yeah. It's just I just wanted to clarify that because the letter that we received from a request is somewhat at variance with that. I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page. That's all.
I did have a quick question. I wasn't at the last meeting, and I guess, and I don't have those drawings from last time, but the new garage or the new addition is determined by the eyebrow, and I'm wondering, is the eyebrow still in the same place it was last time?
I think so.
Okay.
I mean,
For
we
some
can ask,
reason, I remember-
the applicant, but I think so.
Yeah, for some reason I remember it being lower, but I could be completely wrong.
But we can show the plans from last time. They're available. We can bring them up if needed.
Yeah, it's probably okay, but and if the dimensions work from what you all remember, then it's probably where it should be.
I'm looking at the elevations presented last time, and it is in the same location from what I can see here.
Perfect.
Yeah. Okay.
Any other questions? Okay, we'll open up the public hearing portion of this, and we'll start with the applicant if you want to present something.
Yes, Jeff, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Yes, we're unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I just wanted to address the specific question that I heard, I believe Brock asked. The eyebrow is unchanged from our original application. It was placed at the height that was originally for aesthetic considerations. We were really trying to break down the most aesthetic manner possible the height of the existing garage. So the eyebrow has never changed. We just have lowered the garage addition in its third iteration to the height of the eyebrow. And that's specifically the one and only thing we have changed since our previous hearing on October 13th. We lowered the garage the additional 2 feet so that the roof of the garage is at the height of the eyebrow. Otherwise, the improvements that were made in the previous iteration have remained unchanged.
Can I, Jeff?
Please.
This is Brock. In your elevation, what we're looking at, 3.2.
Yes.
The proposed north elevation seems to show a break between those eyebrows, but the west elevation does not. Is that eyebrow going out all the way to the?
Yeah, that's a good observation on the west elevation. No, the eyebrow jogs back. You can see in plan view, the eyebrow jogs back 2 feet, and that should have been reflected in the west elevation
I
also.
thought that was the case. I just.
Yeah, no, that's very observant.
Anyone else have any questions for the applicant? Okay, hearing none, I will open it up to other members of the public who'd like to speak. If you could raise your virtual hand. Okay, the first one I saw was Kevin Harrop.
Okay. Councilmember Haroff, you should be able to unmute yourself. You should be able to unmute yourself.
Oh, I'm sorry. There's multiple buttons I have to press in order to make that happen. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, good, great. And just for clarification, although I was introduced as Council Member Haroff, I'm not appearing here as a member of the City Council. I'm appearing here solely as a neighbor and in no official capacity whatsoever. So just some very brief comments that I'd like to make, and I'd like to also reflect on Ms. McConnell's comments, which I'll get to in a moment. Again, my name is Kevin Haroff. My family and I live at 40 La Cuesta Drive, which is immediately next door to 32 La Cuesta Drive. I have appeared and provided comments on proposed renovations at 32 La Cuesta at previous Planning Commission hearings. And those comments have been fairly summarized in the minutes that staff has prepared for those hearings. I also have submitted written correspondence addressing various aspects of the project, most recently this past Sunday, October 25th. I appear tonight saying that I trust that all commissioners, particularly those who were unable to attend one or more of the earlier hearings, have had a chance to review the relevant minutes and correspondence and have taken them into account in preparing for tonight's hearing. For that reason, I do not intend to repeat what I previously have expressed verbally and in writing. I am confident the Commission will make a thoughtful and appropriate decision regarding the pending project application based on the record as a whole. As a long-term resident of Larkspur's Green Break community, however, I will remind the Commission that ongoing construction activity at this property has been a significant distraction to my family and to others in the neighborhood for many years. I suspect it also has presented significant challenges for city planning and permit enforcement staff. I hope that any action taken by the Commission tonight will help bring to an end both of those things. Finally, I do want to mention that I received a call this evening from my neighbor, Karen McConnell, who, as you noted, owns the property located at 80 La Cuesta Drive. Ms. McConnell has submitted comments in this matter in the past, and she submitted further comments by email this evening, as you've recognized earlier. As far as I can tell, those comments have all been forwarded to the Commission for your consideration by Mr. Toft. They appear focused on the adequacy of the story poles that applicants apparently erected late yesterday afternoon or earlier today. So I'm not sure whether the Commission or staff has really had an adequate opportunity to look at those story poles and to take them into account in making their review of the matter tonight. But I'll leave that up to you. Ms. McConnell did call me to let me know that she would not be able to appear personally at the hearing tonight due to some unanticipated medical issues that required her to be hospitalized in the last day or so. She asked me to apologize for her absence, but also to encourage that the Commission defer consideration of this matter at least until adequate consideration can be given to how applicants have managed the story pole issue and its implications for project approval. With that, thank you for your consideration of these comments, and I would be happy to respond to any questions the Commission may have. That's it.
Thank you. I'm not seeing anyone wishing to speak. Okay, the next up is Mara.
Okay, Mara, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Yes, hi, I'm Mara Passetti. I'm the representative for my parents who live at 32 La Cuesta Drive. So last week I had Neil submit a letter to the board with the issue regarding our neighbor that just spoke, Mr. Haroff at 40 La Cuesta Drive. The story poles were put up yesterday, and I wasn't able to get contractors out to get the story poles up till Monday due to them working at another location up north. I believe that we've listened to all the comments and we've made all the adjustments, even though I'm currently unhappy with them. I think lowering the roof line to the add-on garage makes it look like a storage unit attached to the property or attached to the existing garage. We recently put up a new fence between my parents' home and 28 La Cuesta Drive, and Kent was allowed to pick the fence style along with the plants, and the fence is higher than the previous rotten fence, which gives him even more privacy for his garage. The new structure will not cast any shadows. The only thing you look at when you see the side of the garage, which I had given photos last week to Mr. Toft, that showed that they have bars on their windows. They keep their trash cans on the side yard. There's meters there. So it's not, a desirable area to hang out or to spend time at on that side of his home. There's still 18 feet from the new structure to the new fence on my parents' side. And I think that's ample space. If you walk around the neighborhood at all these new larger homes that have exceeded the FARs of their property, there's not as much space between the new neighbors' structures with the old neighbors. It's a lot smaller spaces. So I ask that the commission just see that we've listened to all the comments and we've lowered the structure. We've gotten rid of the roof extension. We've literally done everything requested. I feel like I've said enough regarding Mr. Harf at 40 La Cuesta. Hopefully everyone was able to review my letter and the issues we've had with him and his misuse of power. I know tonight he made it quite clear that he was speaking as a neighbor, but in the past he has not. He's actually used a private letter that we sent to the city as against us with, he's also campaigned with the other.
I'm going to stop you now. We're not going to talk about that. It's really about the project.
Great. I'd like to keep it on the project.
Thank you.
So that's basically it. I mean, this is a storage unit that we're going to be storing items in, and it's not going to be a garage that people are going to be pulling cars in and out of. And I'm not happy with the way it looks as an interior architect with a design degree. I feel like it looks like a structure that was a shed purchased at Home Depot and attached to the side of the existing garage. I think the 2 extra feet makes more sense, makes it look like it's more part of the structure. And I believe that the plants that our neighbor selected at 28 La Cuesta are going to grow. It says online that they're supposed to grow up to 13 feet, and it's going to create a nice barrier between his property and my parents' property.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to speak on this issue, on this matter? Okay, I am not seeing anyone raise hands. So at this point, I will close the public hearing for this, and I will bring it back to the commission. And I will start with Commissioner Chalmers. You are muted.
Sorry about that. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
So thank you. I did not attend the October 13th commission meeting. However, I want to confirm that I have reviewed all the prior meetings plans. I listened to the recording of that meeting, and I did read each and every item of correspondence from all the neighbors and the applicant. And I actually went down and looked at the story polls today, so I did go and see them. I think the current plan is a vast improvement from where we started. I think it's much more aesthetically pleasing. I think the various issues that the commission has raised have been addressed. And I think the last remaining concern that kind of it got narrowed down to was the height of the garage. And that seemed to be the main kind of point of contention for most of the neighbors. And I think the lowering by 2 feet down to 11 feet is a great improvement. So I'm very pleased to see that. I read Mr. Harroff's letter that we received today, and I noted that he raised a number of issues in that were not discussed by him or were not raised by him. The one thing I wanted to respond on that was he'd asked for the justification of the FAR exception, and I believe that was actually addressed in the July 22nd staff report, so he might want to look at that. I think the story polls, my opinion on that, I think it's it would have been good to have them up a few days, but the existing story polls were actually higher. I did have a chance to go see that. So from my opinion is I'm comfortable with what I saw today. The other issues that were raised in Mr. Harroff's letter, I think are outside of the realms of the commission. So we don't need to be addressed in this meeting today. So I'm kind of in approval of this. I do want to see though, what Kristen addressed earlier, which is the privacy plantings, and ensure that that is a express condition of approval, and that the required plantings are planted on the side of the applicant's property. So those are my comments.
Thank you. Commissioner Swisher.
There we go. So I agree with Ms. Chalmers that they have done what we asked them to do. I can understand why Mara feels aesthetically that the front elevation does not, from a design standpoint, look what she had originally envisioned it, and the architect originally envisioned it to look like. But I think that it is fine. And I think the issue isn't so much the front as it was aside from the massing standpoint. And I think that lowering it by 2 feet definitely improves the massing effect of the house. In addition, I'm reminded by the poem Mending Wall by Robert Frost, where good fences make good neighbors. And although it's an ironic line in the poem, I think the building of the fence and the planting of the trees probably definitely goes a long way to mitigate some of the effects of that massing on that side of the house. So I'm very happy that they have worked with the commission through what I would consider a somewhat difficult process. I think that I'm happy with the plans as they are, and I can see that I wouldn't ask anything beyond this.
Thank you. Commissioner Kunstler.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I pretty much agree with the two previous commissioners who spoke, and also want to reiterate this is really about the application of the design that was presented to us, and not about anything else which is beyond our mandate. So yeah, the lowering, I think the lowering of the garage puts this. Puts the design in a situation where we can make the finding, or I can make the findings for approval. I would hope that any other applicants that are listening to this would would attend to the story polls a little bit more promptly. I also did go back to the property today for a third or fourth time in search of story polls and finally found them. It's a little bit, it doesn't make our job easier when the story polls are not put up on, properly. So any other future applicants, I would encourage them to do that. But in the interim, yeah, I think I can make the findings.
Thank you. Commissioner Wagstaff.
I did not see the story polls last time because I wasn't at the last meeting, but I did go out today, and I would like to say that is an overall project. I think it's going to help the house a lot. Just some of the other things which we dealt with earlier, and it's unfortunate always when neighbors have difficult times with each other. I did actually meet Mr. Passetti, who happened to be out in the front working, taking old fence pieces away, and the new fence looks great. And maybe this will be the start of something nicer with the neighborhood. But I can approve what they're proposing.
Thank you. And I think I would agree with my fellow commissioners. I also went out today and saw the story polls. I think it's actually a big improvement to be lower, particularly for the neighbors' sake. And I guess I would just add my voice to the others that say it's not just our job being harder to not have the story polls up. Part of the point of the story polls is to make it available for members of the public, the neighbors, and so on, to be able to see what the project is going to look like and the impact on them and the neighborhood. So it is definitely not a good thing to have waited so long. But having said that, I think I can probably make the findings as well. So would somebody like to make a motion?
I'll move that we approve the plans as they are currently written.
Do you want-
I recommend that you emphasize adding the plantings along the property line.
I was just going to say that. Do you
Okay.
want to add?
Sure, I'll amend my motion to approve the plans as written with the vegetation as shown on the plans be included on that property. Is that is specifically to the side, or do you want? How would you amend that motion?
I would amend it so it's within the applicant's property along the property line.
Okay, with the plants within the patient within the applicant's property along the property line. Nor mind-minded. Yeah.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So for the record, that was 5 in favor with none opposed. And there is a 10-day appeal period if anyone would like to do that to City Council. Okay, the next item on the public hearing agenda is heritage review, design review, floor area ratio exception, slope use permit and variance 19-38 for 8 Loma Vista. Could we have the staff report?
Thank you, Chair Tauber. I'd like to confirm that you have all received the late mails I was sending out, I think yesterday and today. One is from the property owner in response to a letter from 12 Loma Vista. One is from the historic architect. It was an email just to see, because it was correspondence with the applicant. And one was from the neighbors at 215 Alexander Avenue. So the applicant is proposing to modify and rehabilitate their historic home and update the site improvements around the home, front and back. To facilitate the proposal, the plans include the demolition of the rear single-story elements of the home, the rear detached garage, and the front fence and pool in the front yard. No alteration of the front elevation of the home or the primary roof forms of the southerly living room projection is proposed. New additions include the construction of a detached two-car garage in the lower northwesterly front corner of the property, construction of a new primary two-story addition at the rear of the residence. All the addition would be finished with materials and colors that match the existing historic home. Installation of a new wood deck on the south side of the residence on top of the existing non-conforming side patio, which encroaches into the 5-foot side yard setback. And in relation to that, the raising and increase in height of an existing CMU retaining wall, which is on the outside edge of the deck and current patio. They need to raise that wall up in height in order to make sure they meet the minimum railing height from the increased elevation of the deck. And then last, the construction of a new in-ground swimming pool in the rear yard and various landscape improvements. The proposed scope of work requires the commission approve the heritage review, design review, slope use permit, a floor area ratio exception to allow 0.45 FAR where 0.32 is permitted by code, and a variance to the side yard setback. The city's consulting historic architect has reviewed this project and provided you with a written analysis that's attached to the staff report for you. The Heritage Board heard and considered this application on September 15th, 2020, and had unanimously recommended approval of the project. As provided in the staff report, staff supports the proposed slope use permit application for site grading of 236 cubic yards. Site grading would allow for removal and filling of the existing front pool, the excavation for a new two-car garage in the front yard, and the excavation for a new pool in the rear yard. Plans and geotechnical reports have been reviewed by the city's consulting geotechnical expert, the city engineer, and the fire marshal, who have all concluded the proposed work can be done safely and that adequate fire measures have been incorporated into the design. The grading, as we note, is relatively minimal compared to many applications we see here. It won't impact notable topographic features or vegetation, and this property is not located on a ridge line where the new improvements would impact the views of the ridge. So we have provided in the staff report some support for and recommendation for supporting the slope use permit. With regard to the variance, we have not provided any objection to the side yard setback variance as well. These particular improvements are on top of long-standing historic architectural features of the home. It's part of its original design. The deck won't be visible or increase the size or extent of the existing nonconformity in the encroachment in the setback. So we have provided you with some support for that in the staff report in more detail. And we don't believe that the proposed variance would be out of character with the neighborhood or cause a grant of special privilege, inconsistent with other improvements that people are allowed. So this leaves us with the design review and the FAR exception permits. Generally, staff is supportive of this application and finds additions are appropriately placed and that the finishes will complement the historic home. The proposed new garage in the front yard would not block views of the historic home. It's low and will allow you to look over the top of it and see more of the home than we can currently see with the existing pool and fence in place. The structure raised no issues with regard to the historic architect or the Heritage Preservation Board as well. The proposed rear additions will improve the livability of the home and modernize the existing historic residence, which has suffered from some neglect prior to the current owner purchasing this home. In keeping with city policy to support retention of historic resources, the city has adopted a more lenient approach toward proposals for historic residences. However, in keeping with any application, the proposal must be reasonable in its scale and consistent with a range of approvals that are appropriate. The placement and design details are should offset the bulk and the massing of the proposed new floor area above that permitted. Staff's concerned that the two-story addition appears rather contemporary in its design in comparison to the historic architecture, and it lacks articulation or breaks in the wall planes along the south side that would be more consistent with the existing southerly historic elevation. This accentuates the area of the addition and its bulk rather than minimizing it. Now, having said that the addition is more contemporary, it is noted that additions to historic homes should be identifiable. However, they don't need to be completely in contrast in any manner. You want them to sort of blend but be identifiable is our general approach to this. The historic architect, I should note, has also recommended that the scale of the proposed addition may need some reconsideration. However, as I noted before, the Heritage Board did not follow through on that recommendation. In addition to the proposed 0.4, in addition to the design itself, staff expressed some concern over the proposed 0.45 FAR on a 10,400 square foot lot, and is concerned it could set an undesirable precedent if not done very carefully. A review of the survey indicates that the proposed net floor area of this home would be the 5th highest in the survey. However, the other 4 properties do not exceed the 4.0 FAR that's permitted as a cap typically. When comparing the proposed square footage to lots of similar size, none of these lots also exceeded the 4.0 FAR. And when you look at the lots that do exceed the permitted 0.40 FAR for flat lots, the ones that do exceed are also notably smaller parcels, which is not uncommon. We tend to be more flexible with very small parcels. The FAR exception process is intended to allow limited flexibility to exceed the floor area due to special circumstances, such as small lot size, steep terrain, or historic designation. Approval of an FAR exception is also contingent upon a design that adequately mitigates the bulk and massing of the additional floor area. To offset the additional floor area, the Planning Commission has generally encouraged placement of additions in less visible locations, second stories that step in off of ground stories, or other articulation or features that add articulation, with the intention of mitigating the perception of additional bulk created by floor area that's over what would normally be permitted. The Commission, so in conclusion, essentially, the Commission should consider whether or not some modification to the design for the rear addition is appropriate to try and mitigate the FAR exception being requested and reduce the visible bulk and mass. Lastly, although the applicant noted that there is existing vegetation along the property below them that helps to obscure some views of their southerly elevation, it's also really important to note that, particularly in current times with all the new WUI regulations and vegetation management standards, that there's no guarantee this vegetation will remain in its current configuration or continue to grow in a manner that will screen this home. And although we do use vegetation as a mitigating factor for new additions, it should not be the primary reason an addition is approved. The design itself and its placement should be the focus on making the findings for FAR exceptions in design review. So in conclusion, staff recommends the Commission consider if the proposed design and issues raised in the staff report should be addressed, and if any modification to the home should be requested of the applicant. If you do decide to request modification, we recommend you continue this application to a date uncertain, and ask the applicant to request a one-time 90-day extension of the processing time limit to ensure we don't run out of time while they revise the project and we reschedule this for new hearings. If the Commission determines the project may be approved as proposed, we appreciate you address the findings for design review and FAR to provide us with some direction, and then continue the application to the next meeting of November 10th, I believe it is, so we can prepare those findings for adoption as a business item. That concludes my report.
Are there any questions for Kristen?
I've got two small questions, Kristen, and thanks a lot for the report. It's really crisp. The property at 300 Alexandra Street, is it's sort of developed on one end on its eastern side. Of the other side of that property is actually pretty much virgin terrain.
Mm.
So you see this house very, very distinctly from, given that there's no other structure that's blocking the view of the house or interrupting the view of the house. Is there that particular lot, is there any possibility that that could be legally divided and somebody could actually build on that section of that property at 300 Alexander in the future?
I doubt that that property is large enough because the minimum lot size is based on the average slope.
Okay.
I would have to do an analysis, but I had not noticed in just looking at these properties in aerial view that that lot was particularly large.
Yeah, it's not particularly large, but there are smaller lots, in the towns, because it would sort of change a little bit the aspect of the house if there were another structure there, but that's just not going to happen. That answers the question. My other question is with regard to the pool, and maybe I didn't examine the plans carefully enough. Are there restrictions, not restrictions, or requirements with regard to fencing around the pool for safety reasons? I didn't see that in any of the conditions of approval from the building department. I know there's a gate in front of the house, so it's not like anybody can just wander in. But I don't believe there's a side fence along the property. I don't know if that pool area is actually fully enclosed, and I was wondering if that would be a requirement or not.
Well, there are some alternative approaches someone can take these days to fencing. I'm not sure exactly how it all works together, but I think if you have a particular type of cover and other security measures in the house, you may not need the standard fencing. I would find it likely the property owner would want to fence the.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Okay. I just thought I would, just something I noticed. I just wanted to bring it to your attention. Okay. Thank you.
Is there anyone else?
Yeah, I have a question. And I know you addressed plantings, but so when you look at the house, there's the driveway that runs up on the left-hand side. And there's trees that run all the way up that separates number 8 from number 12.
Right.
So do those trees all remain in place all the way up to the top of the property?
Yes, they're on the other side of that retaining wall, and I have not received any request to remove any of them from either property.
Okay.
They are actually on those trees are on the subject property's property. The property line's about 2 feet on the other side of that wall.
Mhm.
But they're also junipers, and those are old trees. So.
Right, because that seems right now is the only thing providing any privacy, I guess, between those two properties.
Right, and trees do die.
Right.
So I had one question about the back part of the house. So currently there's an existing garage there with access from the back side of the property. And I did read a concern from one of the neighbors about, the fact that access from fire departments, et cetera, under the new design would limit access to that back side of the house. Is that something that we should be concerned with, or is this something that the fire department has already considered and has signed off on?
The fire department has reviewed this project several times.
Mhm.
We went through several iterations on the plans, and they are satisfied that adequate fire prevention methods will be employed. They're requiring sprinklers within the newer portion of the home. I'm
Sure.
not sure about the historic portion.
Yeah.
Fire resistant materials.
Yeah, I'm talking more in terms of access to the property, because you're closing off essentially an access point on the rear side of the property by putting the pool back there and fencing it. And we constructed a pool on our property years ago, and to answer Mr. Kunstler's concern is, yeah, you do have to have some kind of either alarm system or non-climbable fence or something. And again, that's part of the building code, which I'm sure that they'll adhere to.
Well, the fire department did not express any concerns regarding The fact
Great.
that they have a gate to go through in order to enter the backyard.
Excellent. That's great. Thanks.
And I believe you can have a pool cover, which accomplishes the same thing, but that's an oddball shaped pool. It would be really difficult to do that.
Anyone else? All right, we will ask the applicant. Would you like to present?
David, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Hi there. Can you hear us?
Oh, yes.
Awesome.
Could you introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is David Swingross.
And I'm Sam Swengros,
Thank you.
the wife.
And I'm the husband.
And, oh, great. So we prepared a little PowerPoint to run through, and we just wanted to start off by thanking everyone. I know, you know, these are challenging times. We really appreciate you guys reviewing all of the materials that have been submitted, and thank Kristen for the very, you know, thorough staff report and all of her advisement through this process. We can go to the next slide. And Kristen, I think we only have 10 minutes or less to talk. We have a lot that we want to share about the house because of its historic relevance to the city. And we do want to share the current condition of the house, but we will go lightning fast speed. We wanted to introduce ourselves so that you know who is behind this very robust project. Maybe tell them to quiet down. Sorry, we have a full house of children. We wanted to just review the historic designation of the property and review what our goals were when we first started this project many years ago, and then show you a little bit about the house inside, and then address a few key considerations. And we can go to the next slide. We have lived in the property for more than 4 years. We have 5 children. We chose this location because we absolutely love Palm Hill. We are not native Californians. I actually grew up in Baltimore in this 1700s house that you see on the lower left side. And my husband is from Chicago. Before we bought this house, we were living in a 1905 Queen Anne Victorian. So we are very well versed in living in historical properties, and have done our fair share of remodeling. After we moved from this Queen Anne Victorian, we swore we would never do this again, and here we are. And so this is a love project. We think this house is amazingly special, and so we thank you for your consideration as we embark on sharing these plans with you. We can go to the next slide. We wanted to just review, because we've learned a lot going through this process. And one of the things that we just kind of wanted to make sure everyone was on the same understanding of this house is we're extremely proud that it is a Category B historical designation by the city of Larkspur. You can read the definition of what that means, but I think what we take away from this designation is it is very special. There's not many people in the city of Larkspur, when we explain this house, that are not familiar with it, and especially people that have architectural or historic backgrounds. It is such a special example of Spanish colonial revival, and it's really in a landmark position in the town. And we think what is unique about this designation is the word special efforts. And we really view ourselves as stewards of the property. And while there's a lot of work to fix some deferred maintenance, we really look at these remodeling plans as kind of evolving it to meet our current needs, but also the needs of future families.
Next slide, please. So Sam and I drove around Larkspur and to the 144 homes on the historic resource inventory, we identified 9 Spanish revival houses or anything close to it, one of which is ours. These are the list. I think 12 Alexander and 19 Monte Vista are regarded as probably the best examples. While these are beautiful homes, it's different than 8 Loma Vista, and it's hard to understand how 8 Loma Vista looks because there's, you know, what is it, a 9-foot high retaining wall and a 6-foot high fence on top of that. But if you could flip to the next slide, you know, so this is 8 Loma Vista when you take down the fence and take down, you know, get rid of the pool. This is what it'll look like from the street. Right now, all you see is a, you know, a big fence that is visible on the first slide. So what's different about this house than the other houses that we identified? And granted, we may have missed 1 or 2 that's on the historic resource, but we made a best effort there. First of all, it's 2 stories. Second of all, most Spanish revival houses are asymmetrical. This certainly fits the bill. There's complex massing, recessed windows. So one of the things I'd like to point out, if you look in the upper left-hand corner, there's a window there that is actually set back about 16 inches. So into the house. And then you have 2 porches. You have one on the first floor, and you can see there's a door there where you can walk out, and actually we have a sitting chair there. And then there is a porch on the second floor, and that's where my son Charlie spends his summers. He sleeps out on a mattress out there all summer. You'd sometimes see his nightlight reading a book when you walk by. There's, you know, elaborate iron railings, you know, there's steel mutant windows, front patio, recessed gutters. If you look in the upper left, it's probably hard, you know, from this angle, but these gutters are actually pushed back underneath, and the terracotta tile, when it rains, it doesn't flow off the end, it flows into these gutters. There's shutters. I mean, it's just a different type of Spanish revival house compared to what else out is in Larkspur. You know, we really view this house as one of one. So one of the things I'd point out, if you just look at the terracotta tile on the patio, and Aaron, if you don't mind flipping back, you'll see that it's somewhere along the line, 12 Alexander, 19 Monte Vista, you know, somebody pulled that up, and, you know, now there's concrete. And so you won't really see any terracotta tile, but we have the original terracotta tile. We have the original iron railings, you know, the original fixtures throughout the house. This house was built in 1937 and really has not been touched. There was a slight cabinet remodel in 1964 when the previous owner bought it. They put some, you know, sliding glass doors on the side, but apart from, and the pool in 1970, but apart from that, this house is the way it was when it was built in 1937. If you wouldn't mind flipping ahead a couple slides. There you go, perfect.
And then just to review what our goals are, you know, when we set out on this project, is to restore this historic gem to its intended glory. That, you know, we've done a lot of research about the builder and the intent of the house. We want to restore that. Repair her roots. There is so much deferred maintenance. We'll share some of that. It's a little bit overwhelming. And then lastly, to modestly modernize, you know, add an open kitchen that can accommodate our family size, a home office and a master bedroom. And we can go to the next slide, and really how these goals translate into the points of the project, which you have seen, is removing that pool and fencing from the front yard. That's not an easy endeavor, but it was really important to us when we first saw the house versus the pool. It's just not appropriate, you know, for the historic relevance of this property. Relocate that back 2-car garage and be bedded into the hill so that it doesn't obstruct the views, and it can open up a more kind of customary backyard. And then, as I said, add in a master bedroom and office to the upstairs and modernize the kitchen layout. And you can keep going. Thank you. We love our community. We have gotten to know, you know, obviously we've been here more than 4 years. So we've taken our time to get to know this house, get to know the neighborhood. We also know that we're living in a neighborhood that has its fair share of projects going on. But we did walk our plans around the neighborhood to make sure that we were hearing feedback. And we made a circle around our house, and anyone that was able to give us feedback, we were able to get that feedback. Kristen meant, or I think all of you know, there was a letter submitted by our north side neighbors, which we're happy, to talk about further, if you would like us to. And then there were 2 other houses that were right around us. One is actually under construction and vacant, and someone else just isn't able to give feedback. But, we did take our time to make sure that we were being very open with our neighbors on what we intended to do. And we can keep going. And this is just a short slide about square footage. I know we're asking a lot in terms of FAR, and we did want to, we really have done our due diligence on size of homes in this neighborhood. This is just a snapshot of homes that are bigger than the square footage that we would be asking for.
Next slide, please. So we're very proud of the report from the historic architect. We worked very hard to understand this house. There are characteristics that you only get to understand once you live in it. So it was submitted to the historic architect. It came back and it complies with all 10 of the requirements that are part of CEQA, which we feel very good about. I think the key one from our standpoint is number 9. Where it says the new work shall be differentiated from the old and will be compatible with historic materials, features, size, scale, proportion, and massing. And the response from the historic architect is below. Proposed remodel and addition at the rear of the historic property will not destroy primary historic materials or relationships and are compatible with the original Mediterranean style of the home. And then if you look to the right, there is that point. It is a bit large, but at the same time, it does not overwhelm the resource. So I think in order to make the house work for a modern family, you need to have a master bathroom. You need to have a kitchen in which you can have family activities, and you need an office, especially given what we're learning now with COVID and people having to be at home. Both Sam and I work, and right now we're managing, but it's challenging. Next, please. So after the historic architect letter of July 7th, in consideration of the massing, but also in response to the neighbor on the north side, we removed, I guess, what is called a loggia, the roof over the 2 terraces, and in order to reduce the bulk. Next slide, please. So one of the things is we do not regard the back of the house as frontage. And so I think if you look at how the architect originally designed the house, he didn't either. It's really in a way kind of an afterthought, but I do agree with Kristen. At certain points you can see it. At the same time, it is 130 feet from the Alexander sidewalk, and it is already set back from the house. What's that? 23 feet from the corner of the house and 15 feet from the nearest lot line. So I feel it's off in the distance, and there is already a setback. So a setback from a further setback, it seems, well, we'll just leave it at that. So why don't we jump to the next slide? So the rear visual interest, one of the things that the Historic Commission commented upon was how the back of the house has no visual interest. And what we've done, as you can see below the proposed, we've added 2 windows that really reflect, I pointed out that window to the left that has that 16-inch set-in. Now, we're not going to go that far, but it does pop out a little bit to add some visual relief along with the contours of the roof. Also, that is an existing deck, sun deck, and it has a 4-foot high wall. And so what you see with the red line and the blue line is the blue line is the floor, and the red line is the existing height of the deck wall. And to the top, or the flat part of the new addition, it's 5 feet 8 inches. And so, and then there's the chimney, which is set back a bit, and which we are removing, which is higher than the addition. So it is stepping forward, but there's also some wall there already that we feel should be taken into consideration. Next step, please. So this is the property. This is a survey. What there are is, and I hope you can see it okay, there are 2 distinct slopes here. There's, the first one, slope portion B, and then there's slope portion A. And what you have is almost the entire slope of the house is at the beginning. So it's 33 degrees at the beginning. And then once you get to the house, it is actually a little over 8 degrees. And so 8.4. And so the house is sitting on flat land for the most, not flat, but fairly flat. And the slope is at the beginning. So it feels that we're really, taking it on the chin for the portion of the yard where their house actually does not sit. The next slide, please. And so this is just showing that the house sits on top of bedrock. So I think the first one is you drill down a foot and we hit bedrock. And then after that in the back, you actually drill down, 3 inches, and which isn't a surprise. You open up the crawl space, you can see that the house is sitting on top of bedrock. Next slide, please. Okay, we'll go quickly here. The roof's caving in, it leaks. So there's damage to the doors. All the doors need at some point to be refurbished, but it doesn't help that the roof is leaking. Leaks in the living room, leaks in the kitchen, leaks in the bathroom. The ceiling's caving in. My daughter calls it the asbestos bathroom. Next. All the windows are covered in lead, and they have asbestos on the outside, on the edging. And so we had somebody out here for 2 weeks who emptied out the furniture in this dining room we're in right now in order to clean out the lead on the back of the house. We have to clean out the other side and clean out the asbestos. That's a big level of effort there. Next. This is our side porch. I was walking on it, my foot went right through it. The entire joists that run underneath the kitchen and part of the dining room are rotted away. What you see, those lines underneath are knob and tube. Next step, next. So this is knob and tube. It's 3 generations old. It's old. It's, what you see is a lot of it is covered in cloth. It's the original 1937 wiring from the house. Next, please. This is the original furnace. The one on the right was responsible for half the CO2 in Northern California when it was running. To the left is the big asbestos that sat on top of it. We removed all the asbestos. We replaced the furnace at this juncture. Next, please. The retaining wall was collapsing when we bought the house. We had it dug, replaced, fixed, that sort of thing. Next. So this is really my pride and joy. These are the railings on the left are the original railings. On the right is the original railing as well. I cannot tell you how much time driving around with a railing in the back of my car to Napa, to Sonoma, to Oakland to find somebody, an artisan that could actually fix it. This is the entrance to the house. You put your hand on this railing, you can feel the history of the house. It is absolutely vital that I was able to repair these. They're cast iron, they're solid. You can't get these anywhere. And it was worth the effort. It cost a tremendous amount of money, but it's, it is that important. So the next. So part of the cast iron railing, if you look to the left, is iron leaching that leached all over the tile. People said, you'll never get it. I had a half a dozen people come out, couldn't be fixed. I found somebody who was a clay products engineer or a ceramics person in Southern Illinois University who worked on glazings. He, reported me to a, company in Kansas City. We fixed it. If you jump to the next. So you can see the left versus the right. That's the original tile. We were able to save it. That's a big deal, right? I mean, if you looked at the other Spanish revival houses in town, it's just not there. We've got it, right? But it's not without pain. It takes effort to get that right. And, that's, if you're going to do it right. The next slide.
Last slide.
last slide. And so one of the things that we thought a lot about, it was what is the character defining points of this house. The plaster on the inside is really a work of art. I wish you could come and see it. You know, the tile on the outside, the railings on the inside, the floors, the fixtures, the sunlight that comes through this house is really unbelievable. The back is an afterthought, right? It just, everything falls apart as soon as you get into the, you know, kitchen, as it should be, right? Because that wasn't the most important thing. What we're going to do is we're going, and you can see how it's like this, you know, I don't even know what they, you know, like a puzzle that goes back and forth there. So what we're going to do is we're going to smooth it out. We're going to make it into a room that actually you can sit down with your family and have a meal without having to walk around a corner. And we're going to push through the character defining attributes of this house all the way through. And so our idea is to have this house, you know, up and running for another 100 years, long after we're gone. Because to us, you know, it may not be the biggest house in Larkspur or the fanciest or what have you, and it's not for everyone, but it really is a jewel as far as this town goes. So that's that.
And in the appendix, there are some photos that address the letter from 12 Loma Vista, but I don't,
Unless that comes up.
we can maybe just table this. If you want to look at them later, we can certainly do that.
Thank you for the presentation.
Thank you for giving time.
Is there anyone else from the public who would like to speak? Eric?
Eric, you should be able to unmute yourself now.
Thank you. Yeah, hopefully you can hear me. Eric Schrumpf here. We're catty corner from the applicants down at 18 Acacia Avenue. So we were part of that ring walk that they showed earlier in their presentation. I'll be brief. I mean, I think obviously this is an enormous project the family's willing to take on here. I can't imagine the time, energy, and expense already invested, and they haven't started yet. So it's an enormous task. And I would hope, and I think folks we've spoken with in the neighborhood feel the same way, that they would be given some flexibility, some accommodation from the commission. They're obviously asking for some relief on a couple of points with the application, the design review elements and the FAR exemption, but at least from our perspective, certainly seems like worthy of real consideration. And we certainly support and are enthusiastic about what they're trying to do here, and hope that the commission feels the same way.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to speak? Hillary?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Fantastic. I live around the corner from the project. I live on the corner of Pepper and Elm. So I drive by that house almost every day. And I've lived in Larkspur for close to 30 years. And I've always admired that house. And I've actually been inside it with the prior owner. And I am really glad to see that the house is going to be brought back to life. I mean, a functional life. And I think it's going to really be a jewel for the neighborhood. And I hope that the Planning Commission can, see fit to approve the project, because I think it's going to be a great benefit for the city. And that's all.
Thank you. Mike.
Mike, you should be able to unmute yourself now.
Yeah, I think I'm unmuted now. My name is Mike Folk. I live at 16 Elm Avenue. I also live around the block from this house. And as some of you may know, I've developed a number of houses in Larkspur for the purposes of this discussion, 2 on Palm Hill. One in particular is 215 Alexander, which is immediately across the street and is one of the houses that was surveyed and gave the current owners there approved or lent their support to this project. But I think I have a unique perspective here, and I think I can help the commission think about the findings for this project. So as I mentioned, I did develop 215 Alexander. It is a fairly large house. It's over 5,000 feet. And it is within its FAR. But when we sold it in 2016, it was at the time, it was the most expensive home to ever sell in Larkspur. And to this day, it's the second most expensive home to ever sell in Larkspur. So I know a little bit something about like what it is to develop fairly expensive properties in Larkspur. I looked at 8 Loma Vista when it was for sale, and I love Spanish Revival. I live in a Spanish Revival home on Elm. And at the time, I really I wanted to lean into it, and I really wanted to make that a project that I could turn around and sell. But as I toured through it and saw the extensive damage and the time and the effort that would need to go into that property, and at the time, I think the ask was $2.5 million, roughly. There was just no way I could make those numbers work. I didn't see what the high-end value of that property would be, and understanding the FAR constraints there, it didn't make any sense as a development project. And I think that's really valuable for the commission to consider, because if a developer can't do it, and I live in this neighborhood, I love this neighborhood, and this is what I do, then we as a town are relying on owners, especially owners of historic houses. And as the sponsors have pointed out here, this is well, by Larkspur's own past and present book, this is termed an impressive house of its type. If we hope to keep these historic resources in Larkspur, we need owners who are willing to put the time and the effort and the money into this. And this is a money pit. I mean, there's so much that can go wrong with a house like this. But you've got owners here that are asking for consideration and clearly have a passion for taking a house like this and investing their time, effort, and considerable resource to bring this up, not only to the quality that it was when it was built, but as David pointed out, they want to make this beautiful from not just the front, but also from the side. So it's to have that level, to have an owner that's committed to that level of improvement, I think is not to be overlooked, because I don't see another way that this house moves forward and is ready for the next 50 years unless you have someone who falls in love with it and is willing to put the money in. That being said, the FAR is high, no doubt about it, but what are they asking for? They're asking for a master suite and a bigger family room. And that's pretty much what you see from anyone who's willing to pay for high prices for these kinds of houses now. That's a given that someone's going to want to have that in their house. So the ask is not extensive. It's necessary for the house that is for this house. So when you're looking at the findings, I wouldn't look at all the houses on the 500-foot radius and consider where it falls within the FAR and the standards for that. I would consider this, among other historical houses in that survey area, and then of those, which of those are A's or B's? And I would say none. You basically got a one of one here. So when you're looking at the findings, as Kristen pointed out in her report, you can make exceptions for houses that are standouts, and because of their history. And it's without question, this house is that. it was impressive when it was built. From what I understand, it was built for one of the C-level people at Bank of America or Crocker Bank back in the day. This was someone who checked every box, wanted every extra little embellishment for the house, and got it. And that's why the specialness of this house should be preserved. We as a town, you as a commission, should latch on to someone like this who wants to do this kind of work and is willing to put their effort into it and say, yes, we are happy that you're doing this. Yes, it's the FAR is a little higher than we would typically approve, but this is a one of one, and this is why we can support it. So I would strongly urge you to not spend a lot of time fiddling with the design. I think it's a really solid design for what they proposed. It reinvigorates the Loma Vista view by taking away the pool and taking away the fencing. And it gives a improved view from Alexander, where you're seeing the back of the house. So I strongly urge that you approve this project as presented.
Thank you. I think the only person who hasn't said anything who's listed is Andrew. So I'm giving you opportunity if you want to say something.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm Andrew Felden. I worked with Sam and Dave on the design of the house. And yeah, I just would like to reiterate how much, the Sandros's love of the house is undeniable. The amount of effort that they put into date, let alone what they are proposing taking on, is really unparalleled. And just from an architectural standpoint, I think the front of the house and the sort of embellished aspect of it that faces both Loma Vista and slightly the other street there will remain intact and just be refurbished and made refreshed. We're not making any changes to that part, as you can see in the photo here, where the clay tile roof is going to remain intact. Where we're doing our changes are on the back part of the house, which really is kind of an afterthought. This was very much a frontal house when it was designed, as far as the appeal from the street. And so we wanted to do, because it is visible on the side, the south elevation, to bring some of that architectural detail and grammar of the existing house around to make it a more three-dimensional edifice versus just a frontal view. But I'm really proud to be working with Sam and Dave on this project, because their love is undeniable for architecture and for this house. That's it for me. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, I think everybody has had a chance to say something. So I'm going to close the public hearing and bring it back to the commission. And this time I'm going to start with Commissioner Wagstaff.
I don't know whether any of the rest of you were knocked on the door and were shown around by Dave and Sam, but I did, and they were really nice hosts. And I have to say that the house is wonderfully quirky. It's lots of weird ups and downs, and it's a really interesting piece of architecture. And I sort of started with the thought that the FAR seems too high. And I've kind of come around to the idea that anybody who's willing to take on a project like that should be encouraged to do it. If I could give any kind of direction, I would like a little more detailing on the Alexander side. I don't think that gets them in historic trouble, but I can actually support it the way it is, and I encourage them to go ahead and get it done.
Thank you, Commissioner Consley.
Thank you. And thank you for putting me after Brock. So yeah, I spent a lot of time on this, in addition to spending the time with with the applicants, with Sam and David, who, as Brock said, were very, very gracious and showed me quite a number of details, and really explained what they were trying to achieve, not from an aesthetic standpoint, certainly, but also from a programmatic standpoint. And I can find little objection to either. I see what they're trying to achieve, and I also see what they're proposing to basically give to the town in return, which is the preservation of a historic asset, which otherwise could very easily be lost. The amount of work is absolutely daunting. They took me down and showed me where Dave's foot went through the tile and exposed the rotting joists, and all of that has to be repaired. The house as it stands now is barely habitable. So yeah, at the same time, Kristen is very much correct in pointing out where there might be a couple of problematic things to point out, which of course would be the FAR and maybe some massing along Alexander Street. But like Brock, I think I could get over with regard to the FAR. Kristen, also correctly pointed out that the size of the lot, which is not specifically that small, but on the other hand, it is somewhat wedge shaped, which constrains sort of the rear, the rear of the property, to some extent. So I would probably take that into consideration. And I would also take into consideration the fact that it is fairly, the south side of the house is actually fairly distant from the street. If I were to make any kind of suggestion in order to mitigate the points that Kristen brought up, if there were any way to maybe recess the bedroom number 4 a little bit at that level, by a foot or two. I'm not an architect, so I don't even know if that would be feasible, what other cans of worms that might open, but that might be a way just to maybe give a little bit more articulation at the higher elevations of the house. So that's pretty much what I have. I mean, this is the hearts of the applicants are certainly in the right place. And I just want to make sure that sort of I'm performing my assignment as as directed by our city ordinances, and considering the elements of massing and the FAR. And having done a lot of soul searching all through the day, I think I am. So I think I can be supportive and you congratulate the applicants for their efforts they're putting in preserving this asset.
Thank you. Commissioner Swisher.
You're muted.
There we go. Yep, now I'm not. So I am very simpatico to this project. I live in a house that was built in 1937 on Wiltshire Avenue, and we basically did a very similar remodel in 2003 for taking a house that was old and very original, and then having to do it for an expanded family. And I think that the architectural plans are beautiful. I think they put a lot of effort into fine details, and clearly this house is going to need a ton of work. I mean, having done it myself with the infrastructure, especially wiring and plumbing and everything else like that, that's just a labor of love that they're doing. I can understand some of the concerns about massing from the front side, but again, I think that like a lot of things, like like a game of Jenga, you mess with one brick and the whole thing can fall apart. And I think clearly the architect did a tremendous job with this, and I think it's going to be beautiful, especially taking down that fence in the front, moving the pool to the back. I'm really looking forward to seeing the finished projects, and I could support this.
Thank you. Commissioner Chalmers.
Thank you. Yeah, so I do agree with my fellow commissioners on pretty much everything they say. I think the applicants have put a lot of effort and consideration into this project. I really like what they are suggesting. I think with respect to the massing comments, you know, when I did go down and look at the property, I did not go inside. I did walk around it, and I think I ran into the applicant's daughter. So hopefully I wasn't overstepping any boundaries there. And I think a lot of the extension is, you can't see it from the street too much because it's high up and there is some distance from the street. So I don't really have that much of a concern regarding that. My only comment, and I think I alluded to this earlier, was just to ensure that they maintain some kind of separation between number 8 and number 12. It sounds like that those bushes and trees will remain in place, the conifer trees, but I think Kristen alluded to the fact that they may not be there forever as they were old. And I don't know what the answer for that would be, but if just to ensure that there's something in place for that, and maybe they could consider that.
Okay, thank you. Oh boy, sometimes it's not good to go last. I really, really appreciate the passion of the owners for this house. And I actually live on Palm Hill. So, and I appreciate everything you're trying to do, both for your family and for the city. I'm still troubled by the massing and the FAR. So I'm not sure I'm going to be able to get over that. So I may be the lone voice here. But I really do appreciate and would champion everything else that you're trying to do for this house. So I guess that's it. That's my thoughts. So I sense there is enough support though for a motion.
Laura, I was wondering if we could ask the in order to address your concern about the massing, if we could ask the architect whether anything was feasible to tweak the design at all to to accommodate your concern.
We can ask, although I think there is actually a majority of the commission that's willing to approve.
No, I understand that. I understand that.
Provided.
Just about the massing. I mean, you know, initially looking at it, I walked around and stuff, and the house, and I would love to actually get an opportunity to go inside. I've been kind of busy, but tomorrow I'm free. I'd like to go look at it if that's possible. But I think that it is far enough away from the street that the massing effect is minimized. And I think with the fence down, I think it will look different. I think it will look more cohesive. And the elevations, I think, really help, especially on the backside from a massing standpoint. Now, the FAR, I didn't comment on that. It's an unusual lot. And I think that, you can, it is big for the lot, but I think some of that is due, there's a slope issue as well. So, I mean, that kind of decreases your FAR a little bit, allowable FAR. I don't think it's so much out of scale with other houses in the neighborhood in a house of that caliber. So I'm not concerned about that as much as I would be on a modern structure on that lot.
Yeah, I guess I just one additional thing. I guess I would be also a bit more concerned personally about the massing if there were any possibility of another house going up at the corner, that part that's undeveloped, the 300 Alexander, because if there were, then there might be an issue of looming over another structure, but that does not appear to be a risk.
I gave this I sort of initially when I looked at the plans and after looking at the house, I felt there were ways to tweak the architecture that would provide more interesting detail, particularly from Alexander and also from the neighbor on the uphill side, that wouldn't change much. There are big rooms upstairs if you step one back. But I also appreciate what they're trying to do, and it's a grand old house. And I don't want to be somebody to nitpick what somebody else is trying to do. And I don't particularly have a problem with the FAR because I don't think it shows that much. But that's kind of where I landed.
I just think it's a lot of house for the lot.
Yeah, I sort of landed in the same place, pretty much the same place as Rock again, after really thinking very, very long and hard about this. I also, I actually went to the property twice, both the time when the applicants asked me in, and then the time when, and then again today, and also viewed it from the neighbor 12 Loma Vista. And in fact, I think it's going, I know they have some worries about how it might, impact their view, but the view they have now of that house, I think they look over some tar paper or something on that property. And so I'm very happy that the applicants were sensitive to how the house would appear from that angle. So I'm kind of on the same page as Brock, saying, it might be nice if they could tweak it a little bit, but I don't know what kind of cancer word they'd be opening, and it's probably in my view acceptable, given again the positive the positive side of the coin for the city, which is the preservation of this asset.
Is there any way to ask the architect if there could be minor? I don't think it would take much, but I think it could be more interesting. But I wouldn't hold it up for that personally.
Brock, I was thinking of stepping, if there were a way to step back bedroom number 4 on the south side.
Yes, exactly.
That's what I was thinking, but
and even on the north side, the office, I think it's it's the bathroom. That's a 2-story element that could be nicer, and you wouldn't. It's a huge bathroom, and it's actually a huge office. So there's potential in terms of reducing the FAR, and I don't know.
Do we want to ask the architect if that's possible, what his thoughts are?
Yeah, I would like to hear what his thoughts are.
All right, well.
I think the applicant has something to say. I see his hand up.
Okay, David.
You should be able to unmute yourself, David.
Hi, thank you. It's interesting, if you look at the design of the upstairs, careful consideration was done to stepping it in for the office. But I think if you walk upstairs, there's a really beautiful hallway that goes on to this sun deck. Really just gorgeous. And when if you step it in, that hallway becomes, that hallway becomes kind of not useful, because you need to be able to open the door and step in. So you can't really step it back from on the office. Then if you look at the bedroom, the way the bedroom's set up is, and we had, Sandra Bird is a kitchen designer, but she's got great taste. And so we showed her our design, and she talked about, the way the bed sits and how you walk in to the bedroom, and you look right at a wall, but then you turn to the right and you see all this light. And the bed is set so it sits right geared towards those French doors. And I don't have the plans right in front of me. And if you set it in, it kind of, like, from a feng shui perspective, throws off the room. And so we felt like the best design, the best setup and is, to have it kind of run down and have, I don't know the right architectural term, but lower the roof and that sort of thing. So because the bedroom works, with the bed in that particular spot, and the office works when you open up that, hallway door, that is the original hallway door. So it just seems to work that way. And, we tried to, what we did was after we got the comments back from the historic architect, we pushed in the wall, that's on the terrace. We brought it in about 2 feet, and we brought in the bathroom about 2 feet. And so, we brought it, we kind of condensed it and brought it in from that perspective. But I think we're open to ideas, right? What we want is what's best for the house. And, that's how we've always thought about it. And I will tell you right now, Brock, I think Daniel, you came into the house and we started talking about the library. And I was explaining it to you and, you had a skeptical look on your face. And I realized at that point that was the wrong thing to do, to take down, that putting a library in there is not right. What we should really do is take away the sliding glass door. And then when Brock came in and we talked about it, and Brock, going back and forth, we should just leave it. And Kristen brought this up before. We should just leave it the way it is, right? We shouldn't put a deck that's 18 inches higher. We should have it absolutely the same way that it is, and make it more of a trending to the backyard. So you just have this natural connection to the backyard where you go up a couple steps. But as I think Brock brought it up, this is kind of an up and down house. You're always going up and you're always going down. And so we tried to remove some of that. But I think that at the end of the day, the way, it's a design feature. And so the way the patio, the side patio works, it just works that way. And so what we're doing is now we're looking for French doors that we can put off the living room and just leave it from that perspective. And then take off those windows that were put there, I think like in 1970 type of thing. But just to finish up, the office and the bedroom, there was a lot of talk about what to do there and how to make it work. But we're open.
Yeah, I'm not trying to design the house. I don't want to do that. And it was more of a question. I don't think it would take much and it would help, but I would support it as is. And if they can come up with something else as they look deeper into it, I think their intentions in terms of making this house special are worth giving them a little headway or leeway. And so I would move that we approve it, but unless somebody else has got some other ideas.
I'm like you, I don't want to hold up the application, and yeah, if there were ideas to tweak that would be, that would be great, but not of a nature to not make the findings.
I agree. I support the wisdom of the architect here. I think looking at the floor plan specifically, I really like the floor plan, and I understand what they're talking about with the bedroom and having the bed in that position. Sometimes bedrooms are just made like that, and I think, again, you start messing with little bits, it's going to be tough. I suspect that as they build this thing, they're going to find areas where they might want to change it, but I would support the project as is.
So is there a motion?
I will move that we approve design review 19-38, including the floor area ratio exception and the slope use permit and the variance to the 6-foot side yard setback.
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Hi.
And I am opposed. So 4 in favor and chair is opposed. So it does need to be brought back to the next meeting for the findings, right? To approve them. Okay. Congratulations. And I do have to announce that if anyone wants to appeal this, they can. There's a 10-day appeal period for city council. So the next thing on the agenda is to approve the minutes of October 13th.
Make a motion to approve the minutes of the last meeting.
I'll second since Brock and Natasha were not there.
And okay, so all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And so I guess that was 3 in favor and 2 abstain.
Abstaining, yeah.
Okay.
They need to voice their abstention.
Oh,
I will abstain.
I abstain.
okay. I made the assumption they did.
Yeah.
But
So now they have to-
It's a little quiet about it.
All right. So are there any planning commissioner reports?
No, but I assume Natasha looked at the video as I did. I think you said so. That was it's amusing to see what we do here on video. So that was kind of
Probably
fun.
don't want to watch.
No, I don't think so.
Okay, so hearing no commissioner reports, is there a motion to adjourn?
I will move to adjourn.
I will
Second.
second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. I think that was everyone. So we are adjourned.
Okay,
Thanks, everybody. Good to see you all.
thank you very much. Good night.
Maybe I'll see you in a few weeks.
Yeah.